It's a funny thing, having been here a while and actually telling Star Wars stories. Um, I'm in like a very odd, unique position, which is that there's this notion that everything changed and when everything became legends, and I can see why people think that. But having worked with George, I can tell you that it was always very clear, and he made it very clear that the films and the TV shows were the only thing that he considered canon. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
So everything else was a world of fun ideas, exciting characters, great possibilities. But the EU was created to explore all those things. And I know and I fully respect people's opinion about it that some of the material said the next canon part of it. Okay. But like from the filmmaking world that I was brought into, the TV series, the films were it.
Mm-hmm.
They were set in stone. So it was not a big change for me when everyone was saying it's everything's legend status now. I'm like, yeah, that's what I've always understood.
Dave Filoni is not the savior of Star Wars, and that's okay. Saving Star Wars, or more specifically its trajectory, would mean getting rid of the sequels and the Acolyte. Saving Star Wars would not mean reinstating the Extended Universe, or EU. This is because one cannot reinstate something that was never canon to begin with. You heard me right. The EU was never canon, even though it has some good stuff here and there. Henry Gilroy, an EU author, made this statement after Karen Travis left Lucasfilm, in part due to the Clone Wars show not following the EU, as she apparently never got the memo. The quote reads, "It is unfortunate that EU author Karen Travis is moving on because of her opinion that canon is being changed. I guess the big problem is the assumption that her work is canon in the first place. After working with George on the Clone Wars series, I know that there are elements of her work that are not in line with his vision of Star Wars." Gilroy also said, "George gave Dave and I a lot of freedom, and he didn't want us to be limited by what the EU had established. If you don't believe him, take it from George Lucas himself. And now there have been novels about the events after Episode 6, which isn't at all what I would have done with it. The Star Wars story is really the tragedy of Darth Vader. That is the story. Once Vader dies, he doesn't come back to life, the Emperor doesn't get cloned, and Luke doesn't get married." 2008 Total Film Magazine. Also from George, "Those are other authors' interpretation of what I've created, and not to be taken seriously as far as what is really going on in the Star Wars world." George Lucas interview on the special edition DVDs. George also said, "I don't read that stuff. I haven't read any of the novels. I don't know anything about that world. That's a different world than my world. When I said other people could make their own Star Wars stories, we decided that, like Star Trek, we would have two universes. My universe, and then this other one. There are two worlds here," explained Lucas. "There's my world, which is the movies, and there's this other world that has been created, which I say is the parallel universe, the licensing world of the books, games, and comics books." George Lucas Starlog interview. Those who try to say that this last quote does not mean that the EU was never canon need to explain this excerpt from page 7 of Star Wars Insider issue 79 in 2005, 7 years before the Disney acquisition. "Mara Jade is an outstanding character, and we here at Insider thank Timothy Zahn every day for creating her. However, stories from the Expanded Universe books are not part of the canon of the films, and therefore it is doubtful she'll make an appearance. Having said that, we'd love to see Ms. Jade inserted in Return of the Jedi." Star Wars Insider 79, page 7. They also have to explain this quote from Sue Rostoni. No, George doesn't give us much information about his future movies until he's making them. In general, George does not take the EU into account when he's making his movies. Sue Rostoni, Lucas Books / LL Managing Editor 2003. However, the Clone Wars series, which was the first Star Wars project involving Dave Filoni, is, and always will be canon. This is Star Wars, and I don't make a distinction between the Clone Wars series and the films. George Lucas, Sci-Fi Now, October 2011. So no, Dave Filoni is not the savior of Star Wars. However, he is one of the few who have carried their responsibilities to continue its legacy. Its true legacy. George's drafts for his sequels, or at least some of the drafts, actually contradicted the EU, most notably in the facts that Darth Talon was pulled from thousands of years in the future to be there in the timeline. So, with all due respects, EU fans need to stop whining about Dave Filoni. George Lucas, being the creator of Star Wars, has the right to define it. Disney was supposed to continue his legacy and use the sequel trilogy drafts he gave them, which they obviously did not. Those drafts, which we have not seen but know a little about, will forever be canon in my heart. There are also over 100 scripts for Lucas's show Star Wars Underworld, which would have also been canon, and will ever be canon in my heart. It also puts Solo in real canon, as it is directed by his friend Ron Howard, and he visited the set and offered at least some advice, as well as Rogue One, which he, according to both the writer and director, very much enjoyed. With that being said, though Filoni's Star Wars is generally very good, is it canon? Let's take a look at the projects that can be directly attributed to Dave. Rebels continues Clone Wars and stays true to the themes of Star Wars. However, we do not know if or how much of it George may have enjoyed, but I believe it is very possibly canon. We know George likes the premiere, at least. The only other current work in Star Wars that can be directly attributed to Dave is Ahsoka. Overall, I like it, but it could have been better. My main issue with it is how it treats Sabine, and I understand how casual fans found it confusing. It does feel like George's Star Wars, and stays true to and expands on its themes. Bad Batch, although Filoni took a step back from it, probably is canon as well, as it is a spin-off of Clone Wars, and doesn't contradict anything, also staying thematically true to Star Wars. Though he is involved with The Mandalorian, and largely responsible for the success of the first 2 seasons, I will not attribute it to him, as Jon Favreau is the head writer. Same with the Book of Boba Fett. By the way, Grogu coming back was clearly Disney wanting to make money, so that is not Dave's fault. Firing Gina was higher up executives, which meant that they had to fill the space, which they did with the terrible Dr. Pershing episode. Favreau asked Lizzo to be in it, and supposedly Boba Fett was written in, but Kennedy said no to including him. I'd believe it. Also, there is other good stuff in the Disney canon that Lucas may or may not have considered canon. He reportedly enjoyed The Kenobi Show, which I hate, but that doesn't mean that it counts as canon in his eyes. Also, for example, something original and fun like Skeleton Crew that doesn't have a large impact on the universe is almost certainly canon in his eyes. Hope this clears things up. Feel free to leave a question in the comments section, and I may answer it in a future video. If you enjoyed this video or found it informative, I'd appreciate it if you considered subscribing. It would really help me out. And as always, may the Force be with you.